I don't have a single definition, but I tend to be someone that learns by doing. For instance, right now I'm writing my second book. I don't care how well you think you know something. When you've got to put it down on paper, when you've got to explain it to others, that takes it to a different level. So I learn through writing, I learn through watching others, I learn through making mistakes, but also I enjoy some very simple forms of learning. I go birding with my wife, and I take out a bird book, and I have an expert with me and say, that is a paradise tanager up there. And you can tell this, and that's the female. And the reason you know it's a female, not a male, is look at this little marking on the side, or listen to the song. And so, or I was out, when I go saltwater fly fishing, I learn from a guide who tells me how to do it. But I think a lot of people learn from reading. I tend to, although I read, I tend to learn from doing, figuring out what makes sense, and from learning from those around me. Most recently, as I'm writing this book I'm working on in China called Dealing with China, and I'm going to try to finish it in the next 30 or 60 days so I can get it out before too long. I'm learning a lot about that I thought I already knew, but when you're putting it down on paper and you're saying, what are your principles? The principles for getting things done with China, or what are your ideas for U.S.-China relations? I'll tell you, when you're writing it and you have to explain it to others, and then you let someone else read the draft and go over it and say, well, that doesn't quite make sense, Hank. I tell you, to me, that's real fundamental learning. I begin by saying I've worked with many leaders, government leaders. I worked with CEOs when I ran Goldman Sachs for a long time. And I found I worked with some leaders that were very good and some that weren't as good. But you begin by saying, I'll tell you, there is no perfect leader. Every leader is flawed. As I explained, the weakness is often the flip side of a strength. Hank is decisive, Hank's not thoughtful enough. Hank is candid, Hank is indiscreet, whatever. And so, as I've looked at leaders, I've seen that they can come in all kinds of shapes, sizes, with skill sets. But the really good ones have a number of things in common. First and foremost, they have the self-awareness to put together a team of people around them that they help them play to their strengths but compensate for their weaknesses. And then they listen to that team. And if they don't do that, the top jobs always uncover your weaknesses. So you've got to do that. And then, to me, the other things that terrific leaders have are, they're very accountable people. They run to problems. They don't run away from them. Number two, they care about those that work for them. If you don't care about the people and care about the careers of those that work for you, they're going to have a hard time following you. And if you do, they'll help cover up for a lot of your mistakes and weaknesses, and they will make you much better. Very good leaders listen, and then I think this is terribly important, they define their jobs expansively. Now, I look at that a lot like I look at learning. When I hired people at Goldman Sachs or worked with younger people at Treasury, I could tell very early on whether someone was going to be a good leader, because the good leaders didn't just look at the job narrowly. They were learning. They were saying, now, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Why is my boss asking that? They're always learning, growing. And, of course, when you're a CEO, the great leaders are saying, how do I make my organization better? And when people tell them something can't be done, and they know it's important to be done, they don't accept no for an answer. Again, they define that job expansively. To be a good leader in government takes a different mindset, because it is much more difficult to get things done in government because in government, you're often in a position where you feel accountable or responsible, but you can't get things done unless you can persuade a lot of others to join you. And so the people skills are particularly important in government, and being able to, I used to say when I ran Goldman Sachs, I don't care how smart you are, if you can't convince the client that it's a good idea, then it doesn't make any difference. You can't, just having a good idea doesn't work, you have to persuade other people. But I think it takes the same skill set to be successful in government as it does in the private sector. And then, of course, crisis decision making is very similar in whether you're in the private sector or in government. To begin with, in business, you never get all the data, all the information you want before you make a decision, or it's usually too late. You're looking in the rearview mirror. Now, when you're dealing with a crisis and you've got a big, messy problem, there isn't a perfect decision, any perfect decision or solution. So what you're often trading off, doing something that's imperfect with doing nothing, which often could be worse. So what you need to do is you need to be prepared to be decisive based upon the information you know. But very importantly, if the facts change, as you learn new facts, you've got to be prepared to change. I think that a number of things are important to success. Intellectual curiosity is important to success. There are a lot of smart people, but I think people that are motivated and want to do well, and people that are self-aware, understand their strengths and understand their weaknesses, and work to improve their weaknesses, and put people around them that are going to help them play to their strengths and to compensate for their weaknesses make a big difference. But learning is a huge part of success. I say to every young professional, they're talking about their first job, you can afford anything other than not to learn. More important than anything is learning.